I actually think that the secret sauce to communicating successfully with engineering teams, it's not about the technical details. It's not about going one for one with engineers. It's actually more about knowing how to approach the relationship. And something that really clicked for me is that successful communication with engineers, and really in any relationship, right, is actually understanding what each side needs from the relationship. So, as an engineer, and I think I can safely speak for a lot of engineers, what engineers need and want from product managers is clarity.
Welcome to another episode of the Supra Insider podcast. In this episode, Ben and I were joined by Irene Yu. Irene is the founder and CEO of Skiplevel, the premier course for teaching PMs how to be more technical without learning how to code. Prior to starting her company, she was a software engineer, and she's worked at both small startups, but also large companies like Amazon. And at Amazon, she became the go-to person on her team to onboard PMs into technical concepts, which inspired her to start the company that she's building today. In this conversation, we went deep on her motivation for starting Skiplevel, what most people get wrong about the PM and engineering relationships, how can PMs elevate their communication with engineering counterparts and have more productive discussions, and also what technical concepts you should understand as a PM in the age of AI. We finalized the conversation by jamming on fun personal use cases for AI, like building a therapist or coach that's personalized to you and who is available 24/7. If you're a product leader thinking about how you or your team can up level how you work with engineers, this conversation is for you. Enjoy.
If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app, follow us on Substack, give us a rating. It'll help us a ton and help future people discover us while also making sure you never miss an episode. Thank you.
Amazing. We're live. Irene, welcome. Ben, great to see you. Yeah, there's so much I want to talk to you guys about, but maybe where we can start is, Irene, love to share for you to start sharing a little bit more about like your background and how, what is Skiplevel and why did you decided to start Skiplevel in the first place?
Yeah. First, Ben, Mark, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and for us to have this conversation today. So why did I start Skiplevel? Well, first, a little bit about my background. I am a software engineer. I actually came from a business background. That's what I studied in college, and then a software engineering background. And so I've kind of worked in a lot of different companies. I don't know the number at this point, but like I worked at a lot of agencies, which had a lot of clients. So it made me feel like I was working with even more companies, mid-sized startups, Amazon ads. I worked at for 3.5 years, building very scalable, very performant software. And because I have that kind of breadth of experience and I've worked at so many different industries, and when I was at Amazon ads, I'd be working on like anywhere from 2 to 3 campaigns at a time. And each campaign would have like 1 to 2 product managers, like usually a product leader and then a more junior product manager. So I've also worked with just a ton of product managers, a lot of principal product managers and product leaders just across the spectrum. And the one thing that I can say was a very common thread in all of my experience working with product managers in so many industries is that most of them don't come from a product management background, one, or like any sort of technical background, right? They were like, I had one who was the office manager. And so most of them just had no idea about technology. They really could not visualize or understand what an API was. And I'm just going to be very honest. When I was a software engineer, I had difficulty seeing a different perspective, and I would just get so frustrated with not being able to communicate with product managers. And this, I think, is a very common reaction with engineers. And it wasn't until I was working at Amazon and I actually had a product manager who, after a meeting with engineers, came up to me and was like super vulnerable and just was like, I didn't know what was happening in that meeting. And I I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know what questions to ask. I just feel so lost and I need help. And it was like the first time anyone ever said that to me. And so what happened afterwards was I started doing what I call now tech mentorship sessions with her, where we would set up bi-weekly meetings, half an hour, but usually they would go over, where I would do things like I would pull up a software diagram and show her our systems design and walk her through each component. And as I'm using words like microservices, I would explain them. And so she's getting this dual education of learning about how her actual systems, her apps are built while learning about technology as a whole. But then through that experience, it was so eye opening for me because I realized that she really wanted to learn. And this is actually the case for most product managers, but they didn't know where to go. And so many product managers would come to me and be like, should I take a Python class? Which I'm like, no, don't do that. That's going to be utterly useless for you. Right. And it's like too hard.
And maybe
And
a tangent there is like, how did you think about what is worth for that person to know and what it's not? Because
yeah,
you can go, there's so many decisions that you have to make. One is, what is the curriculum? And the other one is, what is the right level of depth that you go into?
totally. That's like a really good question. I don't know. I think through my experience as a software engineer and then up close with a product manager, like I had a product manager where I was talking about Git. I don't know. I was using those words or something. And she suddenly asked a question. I forget what the question was. And the question was so confusing that I was like, wait, that has nothing to do with anything. And I had to stop and pause. And I was like, where's this misalignment happening? And I just asked her, I said, what do you think it is? And what do you think GitHub is? It turns out she thought they were the same thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. So like experiences like that, I would have never thought I would have to teach what Git or GitHub was, or that they're different, right? But through experiences like that's how I think about the curriculum and the things that are not the things that I think are common knowledge is not common knowledge for them, for product managers who aren't technical. So it's like a combination of my software engineering experience and what, like when I'm in a meeting with product managers, what I want them to know, what are the things that I don't need them to know, and then a combination of what I've noticed product managers do and don't know.
I've been in the shoes of the PM in I think it might have been my first PM job where, and I probably slid by for 6 months before having any major kind of what the hell is going on kind of moment, right? But at some point for me, it was a big new feature we're working on. And I've been, in hindsight, a little hand wavy with like exactly how things were supposed to be built.
Yeah.
Not trying to be too prescriptive, but also not trying to be like too hands off.
Mhm.
And at some point, one of the lead engineers on the project, shout out Nick, really helpful kind of like engineer that still today I think about that conversation, pulled me aside and was like, you need to understand how this system is built. Like you need to know what the different pieces are here because you're having opinions about things. And I think you're not necessarily informed if you don't understand the system. And then I will spend as much time with you as you need to answer all of your questions until you no longer have any open questions about what you feel like you need to know to feel confident PMing like the direction of where we're heading with this. And that started something like what you're describing. It wasn't every 2 weeks. It was more like twice a week for probably a couple weeks and ad hoc as needed. And that was incredibly helpful for me.
I love that you shared that story, Ben, because that's exactly right. That's exactly the sort of like collaboration and like understanding that product managers and the dev team should have.
And I actually remember feeling a little self-conscious about the part where I'd already been there for 6 months and I didn't understand some of the basic things. And I heard another podcast you did recently, Irene, or last year, where you mentioned sometimes people they're worried about looking dumb to their team. So they're worried about asking questions. And I was totally that guy that was like, if I ask this question maybe in my first month or my second month, it's totally cool. I get a pass, but I've been like sliding by without even knowing I don't know about this area. And if I ask about it now, do I look like I lack intellectual rigor? Do I look like I'm not curious? Do I look like I'm lazy? So there was some of that to work through. So the fact that engineer extended the olive branch and was like, I want to help you, I feel like just made it okay to acknowledge you're right. I don't know how this works.
Yeah, I love that. It's really about having that safe space to ask the questions that you want to ask without setting the meeting on a completely different course than what it should be, right?
Yeah, this might be a hot take, maybe not, but like I feel like the fact that there's no technical onboarding in companies for PMs is like such a huge failure on a sign of
Totally.
incompetence of the product work, or maybe like the lack of maturity. Like maybe incompetence is a little bit harsh, but maybe it's like the lack of maturity of that
Mm-hmm.
company's product work. Because yeah, I was very lucky in my experience. My first product role was at Asana, and as part of the onboarding, one of the probably I think he was like a distinguished engineer. He would sit down for 2 hours walking all the PMs through their architecture that just started. And one, that was really helpful because I would have never thought to ask for that. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know what I didn't know. And then two, like that person became my go-to person of like, hey, if I have any questions, I can go to them. So it just like, gave me this buddy for technical reasons. And then I onboarded into this, like after Asana, I joined the Series A startup and I found that person, but I knew to find that person because I had that experience. But I think if I had never had that experience, like best case scenario, I would have been like Ben, and 6 months in, I would have asked, be like, hey, because you still like you're feeling this huge imposter syndrome, right? Like already, like
Huge,
as a
yeah.
PM already, you're telling these engineers what to build. They're probably all a lot smarter and are more capable than you are. So like you don't want to come across as like, hey, I'm not only telling you what to do, but I just don't know anything about your world. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I just feel like that's just such a like easy fix to the problem that I'm surprised not more product organizations do that.
Such a full circle moment because that answers the question, why skip level? And this is it. I've like seen the repercussions of this from the perspective of the org, the business, the product team, the impact it has on software engineers, and the impact it has on product managers, which is probably even more than the impact that it has on software engineers, right? Because imposter syndrome is pretty painful. And I'll just make a really quick note and then we can, hop to the next topic. But usually when that happens, I've noticed when product managers feel imposter syndrome, how product managers try to deal with that is that they try to match one for one with an engineer. It's like they try to then get exactly the same knowledge as engineer to be like, I have to understand everything that they're talking about, which isn't really possible. It's
Is that what drives them to want to go take the Python class? Is they're like, I just need to get to
I
like skill
yeah.
level parity?
Yeah, I think at like that, like it's like the unconscious way of them dealing with that discomfort of that imposter syndrome. And so something that I coach product managers, and I just did one yesterday, I was like, don't even try. That's actually not what they want from you.
Yeah, I was going
Like
to
they don't
ask you why you think that people confuse I want to get better at communicating with my engineers with I need to become more like an engineer, right?
Yeah, I really think it's because they don't know how to fix the problem.
Right. They don't know what they don't know, right?
They don't know what they don't know. And so
Hmm.
they think that the obvious fix to the problem is to try to go one for one with engineers, which is to know exactly what they know. But in order to know exactly what an engineer knows, it's years of being a software engineer. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years. There are so engineers at Amazon that I'm like, what did you just say? I have no clue. And I'm not going to try to match them. They're like coding compilers. And I'm like, I can't do that, nor do I want to. Yeah, I think it's just a natural reaction from a lack of resources or a lack of knowing how to actually confront this.
Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like the way that PMs tackle this situation is like the opposite as like us how PM should tackle problems, right? Like they focus on the solution right away of I need to be
Right.
more technical rather than actually like spending time like
Mm-hmm.
understanding the problem. Like why is it important for me to what's happening here? Like why is this engineer mad at me? It's actually the problem is that we're not able to communicate clearly, or there maybe and because of that there's no trust, and because of that they just don't fully believe
Yeah.
that we're building the right thing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I think the last thing I'll say there is like I've seen multiple PMs in my career that are those like I'm gonna learn Python PMs, and engineers end up hating those PMs too because they like end up getting in. Hey, you're getting into my lane. Don't tell me how to build it. That's what people pay me for. Like I'm
Right.
just trying to have a better conversation.
And I would say the double damage for why I think that creates distance between the engineer and the PM in that scenario is that the thing the engineer really wants, and based on all the conversations I've had with engineers who are disappointed with their PMs is I want to trust that what the customer wants and what we need, like what's the why behind what we're building? Like, why is this important? Because we're going to have to make a bunch of trade-offs during implementation as we build this. And I want to have a framework with you for knowing like what's cool to like punt on and descope and what's like the critical stuff that we need. And we need to be able to then anchor that to something that moves the needle for the business, which has to be grounded in customer needs and customer problems. And if you're going to go learn Python and spend a bunch of time on that, you're just going to make the problem of me not trusting that you know what the customer want even worse. Right?
Yeah. I love that you guys shared your experience, because what you guys are describing is kind of a big part of how I felt. And I've actually gone through my own journey of like really pinpoint, like, what is it? What is it? Like, why is this relationship so fraught? What is it exactly? And I think now that I've been a software engineer, worked closely with product managers, mentored intimately product managers, and then through my work at Skiplevel, where like product managers are just coming to me vulnerably, be like, this is what I'm struggling with. I actually think that the secret sauce, and Ben touched on this, I'm going to tell you guys the secret sauce. I actually think that the secret sauce to communicating successfully with engineering teams is it's not about the technical details. It's not about going one for one with engineers. It's actually more about knowing how to approach the relationship. And something that really clicked for me is that successful communication with engineers, and really in any relationship, right, is actually understanding what each side needs from the relationship. So as an engineer, and I think I can safely speak for a lot of engineers, what engineers need and want from product managers is clarity on what to build, or at least that's the expectation. And so software engineers are like, I want clarity and I want you to be specific, because I need to be specific with this machine and with this code. And so you need to be specific with me of what I need to tell the app. Engineers get frustrated when requirements then are like unclear or they keep changing. On the flip side, what I'm hearing from product managers, what they want, and I'll let you guys share your experiences. I think product managers desperately need engineers to help them understand what's possible. Like what can actually be built efficiently within like system constraints, but also solves the actual pain point for that customer and is like the most elegant solution. And we could do this in 3 months or whatever the stakeholder is like putting pressure on me for. And so I think what happens is like typically in the industry, the way that this relationship works is that the product manager is siloed. They do the product ideation, the market research, the customer research, and then they come up with the product solution and the spec. And the first interaction with engineers is during the BRD meeting, where, the BRD is shown with the solution already there. And because the engineers are being brought so late into the process, they're like pushing back, because engineers just think about feasibility, right? So they're like, wait, but this isn't feasible. And you want me to do it in when? That doesn't, that's not, the math is not mathing here. And then of course, what happens is the engineer has to explain to the product manager why it's not feasible, and they have to use technical terminology.
And then the PM gets frustrated because it's like, hey, I want you to be on my side of the table trying to figure out how to solve this, and all you're giving me are reasons why we can't do this, we can't do this, right?
Totally. And there's so much, I mean, that's like another one of those like nuances. But then the product manager is, if the product manager doesn't understand simple terms, didn't get the sort of training, right, Mark, that you got, like the onboarding that you got, they're not going to be able to understand simple technical terms. They don't understand how to think about trade-offs. They're like, why is maintainability important for an app? So now this mutual understanding has completely broken down, and it's like a very painful cycle. And basically what happens is, if we look at it from a high level, the engineer is thinking, the product manager is not helping me understand what I need to build. The product manager is thinking, the engineers are not helping me understand what is possible to build. So both sides have this feeling of, I'm not being helped.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because the way I generally think about a path forward, or the kind of cultures that have been the highest performing teams that I've been a PM on, are ones where you feel a shared sense of it's all of our job to right size the solution for the problem and the need.
Yeah.
And it's not like an adversarial, we're on opposite sides of the table thing, but it's almost like the system is what it is. The system doesn't care about our feelings. The system doesn't
No.
care about the customer. The system doesn't care about the business. The system just is built the way it's built. But there's these external forces that are pushing us to evolve the system. And right.
Mm-hmm.
And we constantly need to make decisions about whether to make small incremental changes to the system or whether we need to reevaluate and make large overhauls to the system. And
Mm-hmm.
the PM will generally push to hold off as long as possible on overhauls for the system and to pay all that to accumulate the technical debt over time as much as possible. And the engineers are going to be the ones that are like getting more and more burdened by that technical debt over time. And then, so I find that it's always helpful to also have that conversation on the background where the PM proactively comes to the engineers, be like, straight up, if we did an overhaul, would like all this time we've been spending discussing this stuff go away for not just this feature, but like future iterations? Because this is going to be an active area of the product now. Like we're going to do a bunch of stuff here. So is it going to be like pulling teeth every time we want to make small changes here now because of all this tech debt? And we should like actually prioritize a project to maybe pay that off first. So now you're coming into their world, not in the code base. You're not coming into their world trying to do their job, but you're coming in as like a partner that's, hey, is there something I can do to maybe actually make your life better? Right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh man, Ben, you just covered so much. I'm like, where do I like
Sorry,
where
I
do
didn't mean to take it off track, but it's like
no, I love it. I think like the solution is really changing that dynamic I just talked about. Like the dynamic shouldn't be like engineers saying, tell me what to build, and PM saying, help me understand what we can build. It really, the dynamic I think should be the product managers are saying, here's a problem we need to solve. These are the constraints. And the engineers say, here's what's possible to build and the risks. And the product manager needs to always be thinking about risk management. So what I teach product managers when you're approaching a conversation with engineers, you want to keep not just conversation, but just like in general, what you're trying to figure out when it comes to more like technical side of it is 4 things. 1, feasibility. I call it the fair framework. 1 is feasibility. What is the feasibility of whatever solution you're looking at? 2, alternate solutions. Right? What are the alternate solutions? Are there actually alternate solutions? And by the way, alternate solutions could be alternate solutions in product design or in technical implementation. And engineers can be problem solving partners in thinking through both. And then you want to think about impact, right? So impact can be short-term impact and long-term impact. So this kind of goes towards what Ben was saying, like product managers don't really think about the impact, but the impact is very real. And then the last one is risk mitigation.
The impact, sorry, just to clarify, the impact here is the impact in like the code base, basically, and like the stack, or the impact for customers?
Technically, if there's an impact to the code base, it bubbles up to impacting the app and then impacts the customer. But like impact can be something like, okay, in the short term, we need to get this out in 2 months for whatever reason. Maybe a salesperson promised this feature, right, to a customer. But in order to get it out within this time, these are the things that we're not doing. And you have to know that this affects maintainability. Or now this monolith has ballooned so much that if we want to split it into a microservices, which is necessary for this app to scale and serve more customers or add more features, it's going to be a lot harder. So it's
like the downstream implications and the trade-offs that you're accepting.
Yeah, right. Scalability, fault tolerance, maintainability, ease of implementation. These are just some of the kind of trade-offs that engineers are constantly thinking about in their head. They don't necessarily say those words. They're not saying like fault tolerance, but that's like what they mean. And so those are the 4 things as a product manager. If you're not able to think through that, totally fine. But those are the questions that you need to be asking engineers as you're having those conversations and really figuring out, well, what is the best solution for this problem and this pain point.
So, okay, so it was, just to recap, it was FAIR, F-A-I-R. So
FAIR.
feasibility. What alternate solutions? Impact.
So that's long and short-term impact, and then risk management.
Risk management. Got it.
Yeah.
So grounding every conversation with engineers in one or multiple of those and not necessarily veering into things that are off that is a good kind of...
Yeah, those, you don't want to get stuck in the technical weeds with them. Those are the 4 things that you want to address with them. one of the things that separates experienced engineers and not experienced engineers is experienced engineers can think through all of those things. Like they can quickly, like you tell them, this is how I want the product to look like. An engineer will quickly be like feasibility, technical trade-offs, pros and cons, system design, what is the current constraints? And then you want to have conversations of what are the alternate solutions? Because the other thing to know is there is no perfect solution. It just doesn't exist. I don't know that there's a perfect product solution, and there's never going to be a perfect technical implementation solution unless it's like the feature is so tiny, add a button or something, then that's pretty straightforward. But when we're talking about scalable and performance software, there isn't really a perfect solution. So there's always pros and cons, and you want to think about what are the alternate solutions that will give us more pros and the cons are more manageable or as manageable as possible. And that requires thinking about the feasibility of all those alternate solutions. What is the impact of them? And once you can identify the impacts, how do we mitigate this? How do we mitigate the risks?
So one thing I see, it's like such a good framework for where I think we wanted to go next, which is talking a little bit about how AI is throwing a wrench into everything that we all came to know and get comfortable with maybe a little bit over the last decade. And one thing I've observed personally, and I'm curious to hear what you're seeing in your conversations with folks, Irene, but one thing I've observed is that as AI has started to make its way into products, and specifically I'm imagining product teams implementing AI features into their products, there's almost like a transition from I can go to an engineer and I can get a very deterministic answer, like we're going to build this and then this result will occur, to more like I don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? The engineers will build it, will implement it, but there's like unknowns in the way something's going to behave. And I've been observing that can create some tension and uncertainty for the PM with the engineer, because going to the R in your framework with the risks, you used to be able to get your fully grasp all the risks with what you're working on if you put enough legwork in. But now the technology itself is a kind of a wild card in a lot of cases. So I'm curious, are you observing like increased or different kinds of tensions starting to pop up between PMs and engineers because AI is making its way into the process?
Yeah, funny enough, I haven't spoken to as many product managers about this. I think because AI is still such a new field, I don't know how many product managers are building AI features. But the funny thing is, I've actually spoken to software engineers about this exact thing that you're talking about, Ben. Yeah, because there is such a risk to it. Like this LLM, it's not sentient, right? Like the models aren't sentient, but it does things without you asking to do it. And if you don't want it to do it, you have to tell it explicitly not to do it. And so actually one of the processes that engineers do, but engineers would love for product managers to do more of, is like that process of testing the AI in all sorts of questions, commands, and to get all the edge cases. Is like I spoke to one software engineer where they had the initial, so they have a knowledge-based chatbot. They fed the model with all of their internal like customer requests, like FAQs, documentation. And then a customer would just come in and be like, I have a question, or a potential customer who's evaluating signing up would ask it questions. And he had a specific scenario where the customer kept talking to it, and then the LLM offered this person a discount. And they were like, oh, don't do that. Like you got to talk to a salesperson for that. And so as many edge cases as the product manager can help catch and then like update the prompt, that's like extremely helpful for engineers to do that kind of massaging with the model to see what the inputs are and what the possible outputs are, and updating the prompt to go with that. But it's like an iterative process, right? Like customers ask all sorts of things. Customers might try to manipulate the model. We don't know. But as much as in the process, the product manager can like stop that risk and catch those edge cases, software engineers really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think my kind of putting the PM hat on now, if I were going to guess why PMs are not doing that in the first place, is one, I think they maybe don't know how to do it. Like there's just maybe model evaluations are still very like a nascent field. And I
Yeah.
think the other part, like even myself, like thinking about it, is how do you know about edge cases that are like dynamic, but not deterministic? Like how, I don't think even in my like wildest imagination, I would have imagined, hey, like this LLM is going to notice that this customer is not 100% bought in, and maybe the way to go about it is to a discount, right? So I think like
Yeah.
it's almost like a combination of like maybe a skill gap, but also then like the unknown unknowns.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I don't think there's like a perfect pipeline process for this. Like I said, I think it is just an iterative process to see what people come up with. I haven't really figured out like what the process should be to try to catch as many edge cases to start with. I think it's possible because now AI features are being built on existing apps that's been around for a while. So I wonder if there's a way for us to get like data from past interactions with customers
Mm.
and use some sort of AI workflow tool to synthesize all of those conversations, get common themes, and design the prompt and like the model on that.
One thing I'm waiting for, and maybe if someone already knows of this tool, feel free to like DM me or us to tell me about it. But I'm waiting for some kind of system that allows you to have the AI observe whatever space it is you want to implement it in, and then to derive like the rules or like the heuristics. And there's almost like either like a scale or like a toggle, like a turn off or turn on, like all the rules it comes up with. For example, if there was a rule that's if someone's unhappy, offer them a discount. And then I'd be like, no, toggle off, right? There's like a give me all those like little controls almost. And then that would, I think, help me as a PM when I'm working with engineers, because I am working with a couple companies right now that are implementing AI, just know like even what the options are. But I think we've gone from a world where like a finite number of options on a paper menu to an ever expanding menu that continually redraws itself based on
Yeah.
whatever the inputs are from users. And I don't have unlimited hours as a PM to explore all the different permutations of the menu. And I don't think the
Yeah.
engineer does either. So it's, whose job is that?
I'm almost I'm almost wondering if we have to like reimburse from first principles. Like, how do we go about creating those rules? I wonder if it's less about creating that menu. And I'm just thinking out loud here. I don't know if this is a good idea, but what if instead, I think the thing that you want to avoid basically, it's like those like really shitty, risky situations that just that are going to be really bad for the business, which is maybe giving a discount or maybe telling a customer to fuck off, right? Like something like that. That's just going to be like there's going to be some serious like PR consequences, or maybe like giving some sensitive customer data, right? So I'm almost thinking like if I was a PM in that team, like maybe what I want to do is actually do a brainstorm exercise of like let's list all the things that are the worst things that could happen, and maybe we start there, and then based on that we start to work down the pyramid.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think that with AI and these models, there's so many unknowns there. Like we just don't know how it's going to act. And so typically in situations like this, when we don't have control, what they say is you should focus on the things that you can control. So it's like, okay, what do we know? We know that we don't want to offer the customer a discount. We certainly don't like any discount, right? They have to talk to a sales representative. We know that we don't want to give any data to this customer, right? Or we know that the only thing that this model that you should be doing is giving it answers based on what we've given you inside of this knowledge base. And I think like operating from that place of, okay, what do we know that we want and what do we know that we don't want? And I think if we were to come to it with that approach, and if product managers were to be able to get super clear on those things, that would probably go a really long way in catching a lot of edge cases to begin with.
And other than edge cases, because I think that makes a ton of sense, what other kind of like skills do you think PMs should be keeping in mind now in this AI era that maybe were not as important as before? And is
As you
it about
guys,
skills like we talked earlier, like learning Python, or is it about something else, like a different way of approaching collaboration with engineers?
yeah, I will be honest with you. Like this shift that's happening right now it feels really monumental. Right?
Yeah.
It feels monumental in the product management space, but kind of in life in some way. Like even as a founder, it's been monumental for me. But and so I haven't I think I'm in the same boat as you guys and everyone else. I'm like trying to wrap my head around it. What does this actually mean for us? But I think, again, going back to like my system of, okay, there are things that I know. I don't know what's happening. There's kind of some chaos. What do I know? And a lot of the times, like, like the way that I approach the skip level program too is like, there's so much value to just going back to the fundamentals, like grounding yourself in the fundamentals. And a lot of the technical skills, or like the things that product managers need to know in this AI era, is actually not that different from what product managers should be doing like now. And so one of them is, I think, this is term AI PM that's floating around, which, by the way, I think people haven't really defined like, well, what really is an AI PM?
I mean, I
So
think we all are an AI PM at this point, and if you're not, like,
totally.
you're behind, right?
That was
I think, like,
yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
yeah, I mean, I think the way people are throwing the term AI PM, and again, I completely agree. Like, I'm just being a little bit joking around here, but yeah, I think everyone should be familiar with AI. I think what I think there's actually a skill set that's different is people that are actually really good at working with AI scientists and research labs and taking those models into production. Like, that's like, by like, out of all the AI PMs that we see on LinkedIn, that's like probably like 0.05% of those PMs.
I was
the
going to
rest,
say.
Yeah, if you're using AI to do your job as a PM, or you're simply a PM at a company that is implementing features that are powered by AI in a broader product that is not an AI product, I would not consider those AI PMs.
So I was reading Akash's newsletter, and I don't know if you guys signed up for him, but he actually came up with terms for it that I was like, okay, yeah, this is helpful. He was like, AI PM is a PM that works with machine learning engineers and AI specialists to create models. So they're working at like Anthropic, they're working at OpenAI, and then you have AI features PMs, which is you're creating AI features for a company that isn't actually AI, it's just like an AI wrapper kind of, right? And then the last one is AI powered PM, which is you're using AI workflows in your job, in your everyday roles and responsibilities. So let's just, for the sake of this conversation and not being confusing, let's like adopt the word. I'm going to use the word AI features PM to just refer to product managers who specifically are building, like working with engineers to create AI features, right, to enhance their existing product. It's so interesting. I think, Mark, you were the one that said this, is I see it going two ways, and I think it's still a little bit early to figure out which way it's going to go. But I think that either like AI features is going to become ubiquitous. It's either going to become so fundamental as user authentication and search functionality that like everyone's going to be an AI features PM, right? And you should be learning about the technology behind AI the way that you should know what an API is and what data is, right? Or it could go the other way where like product managers then silo themselves and say, I specialize in AI features, in working with engineers to build AI features. I can see it going both ways. I think it's so early that I haven't been able to like really pick which way it's going to go. But the way that I see technical skills for product managers and what's important is, again, going back, I think it's not that different from the core technology fundamentals. I think that every product manager should know what an API is. I've actually had product managers be like, I don't know what an API is. You should know that. What is data, relational data, non-relational database? What is a microservice, right? I think that the core of AI, I think everyone should understand. Just to be more specific about what core AI concepts are. LLM, everyone should understand large language model. What the role of data is in that. Understanding data input, data output. Believe it or not, I think there really are product managers that's like, I don't understand what that relationship is. Data input, labeled data, unlabeled data, structured data, unstructured data. Understanding LLMs, you should have some understanding. And again, you don't have to go super deep into any of this, but supervised learning, unsupervised learning, what is reinforcement learning, and how that affects output. What is a vector database? Again, you don't have to go deep into how a vector database works. That's if I was like graph database. You don't have to know how a graph database works, but understand what it is, right? Hallucination, terminology, hallucination, inference, prompt engineering. What is a context window? and why that's important. And then there are other things like data governance, right? There's like privacy laws around these things. Understanding, being involved in conversations with engineers about why data collection, data cleaning, data labeling is important for the model, especially if you're building features like a knowledge base conversational chatbot. And I think every PM should understand those core AI concepts just for them to have some sort of map, right? You have a map, you have the general shape of the city, you have maybe some of the major avenues, but you don't necessarily need the buildings. But then I think, so I haven't done actually a full-on research project into this of what are the types of AI features that companies are building. There's a lot of them for sure. I couldn't list all of them out. Even if I did, I wouldn't want to put either of you to sleep. But if I had to venture a very strong guess, I think that the top three most common AI features are being built is knowledge-based chatbots, recommendation engines, virtual assistants with text-to-speech and speech-to-text. And often you'll see that these AI features are actually combined into one. So it's like multiple AI features to build one AI thing. And so if, again, I don't have the percentage, my guess is most product managers, if you're building AI features, this is what you're going to be coming across. Then you need to go a little bit deeper to understanding what are the technologies engineers are using to build these features. The most common one is RAG. I don't know if you guys remember what it is, what it stands for. Retrieval augmentation
yeah.
generation.
Yeah.
Context window, vector databases, and then terminologies that is not like services and tools. For example, face. What is LangChain? That's just a Python JavaScript framework for how to build a RAG pipeline. Hugging Face. And yeah, so it's like the core AI concepts. And then if you actually find yourself building an AI feature, great for you. Then I would go a little bit deeper to understanding what that process is for engineers and the technologies that they use in order to build those AI features, so you can have much more impactful technical discussions.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like totally agree with all those terminologies. Maybe another one is like open source models versus closed source models. That's another one. I think that to me, the two really important skill sets too, if you're like one of those like AI feature PMs, one is like going back to the edge cases, like being really good at like writing good like evaluations and having a good intuition about what's acceptable for different use cases. Like when you have to be at like 99% versus maybe like 95% is okay. And I think then the other one that we've actually talked about this in the podcast a couple of times is what we call like the AI demo trap, where it's really easy to put together a prototype that can get like the execs super excited then. But the one thing is doing the demo, another thing is like getting to those like 99% like accuracy in production. And I think there's like definitely a lot of like new skill sets that are getting developed as we talk to how do you get to like that last like maybe like 50 yards, right? Of like you have something that's working. How do you get it to 99%? How do you do it in a way that's safe? Those are like the other things that I'm like, and I know a lot of it's probably like engineering driven, but I think like understanding like how the cycle becomes longer because of these things is probably pretty important to also keep your promises with your stakeholders. And again, like not burning bridges, right? Because if you're putting a lot of pressure on your engineering team because, hey, like I said I would do this in a month, but it actually takes 4 months to get there. Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to recover from that.
Yeah, that's also a very interesting question, because I've been playing around. My whole team has been playing around with testing out different tools, especially when it comes to prototyping, right? Like that's what you were kind of talking about, Mark. And we were testing V0, Lovable, and then there was one other tool that we're in the process of testing, and it's mind blowing. Like as a software engineer, and so when I started out, my title was actually design technologist. This was like early in my career, so I like have a design background, and then I coupled that with front end engineering. It's incredible how far it can get. It's truly mind blowing that you can just give it one prompt. We like tried one prompt. It was like 2 sentences, which was like, create an e-commerce store with a products page, a shopping cart, and checkout. And we like tested that same prompt across multiple kind of like tools to see what it comes out with. And it's like mind blowing, right? Um, but as I play with these tools, like the thing that I come down to, like you said, Mark, is like the 90% to like the 99%, is it really can't get you to that 99%. I don't think designers are going away. I don't think that engineers are going away, because I think you need the designers and you need the engineers who are specialized and has the context in order to get you to that 99%. And then the other thing that I think about in terms of getting to that 99% too, that I think about as an engineer, is these tools were not built for scale and not built for performance. You can have the UI and you can have, we actually built a Spotify clone, and like you can have the page where the songs are, you could even play the song, but the truth is it's just a standalone kind of app, right? When it comes to like dependencies and like interdependencies with other systems, like these AI tools just don't really have that. And there's always going to be limitations to memory. If we're talking about building at Amazon, those AI tools can be really helpful in helping designers, helping product managers, helping engineers have a better sense of what is the best experience, and like doing a lot of that legwork. But really getting to that 99%, I think we still need people who are specialized.
It sounds like you're playing a lot with these different AI tools. What I'm really curious to get your thoughts on is like, how are you thinking to modifying your business or your course based on those learnings, right? Because like there's two thoughts that come to mind, and yeah, if it's an uncomfortable question, feel free to ignore. But the one is like that awkward question that Ben and I might have had for the engineer of, hey, what does this mean? Like now we can go to ChatGPT and ask that question and actually like make that our tutor as opposed to having that engineer. So that's one side, right? Of like all of a sudden you have this friend who's willing to talk to you 24 hours, which is really nice. I think the other one is, okay, there's now all these different tools that in a way, in theory, it should accelerate like how quickly like you can work together with engineers and designers and PMs, right? Because all of a sudden, instead of having a spec, you can actually like put the spec into one of these tools and you have a prototype. So I'm curious, like, yeah, based on those two angles, like how are you thinking about like the future of what you teach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the way that I see AI is like, I think some people are approaching AI as if it has all the answers and it's just like this God. I actually think that AI is fantastic, but it's only as good as the context that the person has when they're putting in the prompt. And I don't think that the AI and LLM is able to have all of the experiences that I have as a software engineer, working with product managers to know exactly what you need to know and what you don't need to know. And also I design a lot of my hands-on exercises are designed specifically that's very practical, that actually will get the product manager to a much higher level of understanding. I think the visuals are very important. I haven't seen AI be able to kind of have that teaching context with the visuals, with the exercises. And so I still think that experience that I have is context that I have, that if you're a product manager, you're sitting in front of this AI, teach me everything. You don't know if what the AI is spitting back to you is actually good or not. And then you have to ask the AI follow-up questions, right? But if you don't really know what questions to ask because you don't really understand what's being taught, that's rough. And so I definitely think every product manager should be using AI to be like, okay, what is an API at work, to help them understand it. But I don't know. I still think my course is really good. And I don't really see AI kind of taking that away.
Yeah. No, I'm sure, Ben, you can talk about this too, because Ben, you have a course, you have an AI copilot in part of the course. And I think basically I've heard you say both the same thing, right? The important thing is like that unique proprietary content of the way you explain something, but then there might be some enhancement you can do with AI.
Yeah, the way I think about my course is about interview prep, right? So when you're preparing for structured interviews, if you have the right context in something like a Claude project, which is what I built for my AI copilot, if you can feed the right files, which are essentially my lecture materials and like artifacts generated based on things like mock interviews I've done. And I've asked Claude to take the transcript and derive like the key rules and themes and takeaways and the do's and don'ts. And so I've built this kind of, you could argue it's a proprietary knowledge base of files. And so you could put that in a Claude project, and then you could give some really good instructions, and then you can create some predictability around what you're going to get when you drop a sample question into the chat interface inside of Claude. And it's going to check in with you the way I recommend checking in with you as a candidate. It's going to do all the things that I coach people to do. And ultimately, it's really good at giving people practice. So that's, I guess, a product I've built using AI that I give to my students and people I do mock interviews with. But the way I'm thinking through that now is, if I want to monetize just that, because there's some people that don't want to shell out what used to be $600, now it's $1,000 for my course, or spend hundreds of dollars an hour on mock interviews with me, and I want to create something that people could use, like how might I scale that product to be more broadly available? So that's one way I'm thinking about just like AI in my course. And then the other piece is, I keep getting asked questions in both my classes, in one-on-one conversations with students over email, but also over calls and during mock interview coaching sessions. And I want to build like a knowledge base with all the kind of like questions I get asked. And I am still, so I'm on the lookout for some kind of product that could potentially allow me to just plug in a screenshot of a thread and be like, create an FAQ for me based on this and add it to the knowledge base and done, right? Like those kind of things would help me, I think, start to build more enterprise value in the long term around my course by using AI to just like synthesize large amounts of data and create artifacts that I can offer people. That's the main ways I'm thinking about it right now.
Ben, you're giving me a lot of ideas. It's
Yeah,
really
if you want to
cool.
build any of these, I'm happy to be a beta customer for you.
Because Ben, the way you do it right now is you have a Google Drive folder that you share with people basically. And then like you have some of the recordings of maybe mock interviews, your lectures. And then the idea is to like maybe have a Google Doc with all the FAQs that keeps getting longer and better as
Correct.
you have more courses and you do more coaching basically.
And then if you think about FAQs, the cool thing about FAQs for a course business, and I'm sure, Irene, this would also maybe be applicable for you, is theoretically, if I have a growing list of FAQs, if every time I have a new FAQ that I think is interesting, I could record a video just about that. If it's from an email thread, I could record a video that's like a 1, 2, 3-minute video about it. And now that gives me content I could put on YouTube. It gives me something I could put on LinkedIn for a new post that then promotes. So you can get some kind of like flywheel going by leveraging the questions, like the gaps in your course become the source of inspiration for new content that makes the course itself more valuable and the overall offering more valuable. And that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking about, is how do I get more of those flywheels going?
Yeah, that's a really smart way of thinking about it. I actually have that for my newsletter, where I have a section where I say, ask me anything. And then people will ask me, it's a pretty technical question. And then I would think about how to answer them. And I think doing the video format is really great. I don't think that AI can really, like replace that kind of nuance. The other thing I thought you said was really interesting, Ben, is that, so what I heard you saying is you're creating like a Ben persona.
My AI copilot it's interesting. I wouldn't consider it a Ben persona, but it's almost like a persona that has internalized all of my advice in all of the materials that I coach people on. And so it's almost like this hyper synthetic distillation of what the ideal performance in an interview should look like. And then I offer that to people so that they can start to recognize the patterns and what great answers look like. And because people keep coming to me and they're like, I want like, it's almost like they're looking for a cheat code for the interviews. And I have literally seen people get asked a real interview question about a question that we practice in a mock, where I give them all my feedback and they still fail the real interview. Okay. And the reason that happens is they have not internalized like the meta dance that they're doing in the interview, and they have not internalized the rhythm of the conversation, and they haven't internalized how to think through and walk someone through their thinking in a clear, structured way. So I've tried to create a bot that models that behavior for people, so they can see what that looks like.
I wonder how much of that is like emotional, because talking to you and like an AI, they're not like anxious, right? And then when they're in an interview, like all of that just flies out the window, and all they can focus on is the fact that they're like in this interview.
Totally. I was recently playing with Tal review because Tal was on a previous episode and he wanted to walk through my Copilot, so we played with it a little bit. And he just started throwing curveballs at it, like, I'm hungry, or like, I'm annoyed with this answer. Could you give me something more original? Just kind of like snarky, mean things to say. And yeah, like obviously the AI doesn't lose its cool. It's, that's actually not related to what I want to talk about. Let's come back to this because here's where I'd like to go next. Does that sound good to you? Right. So it's just really cool that if you give the AI some kind of goal, or you give it like some context about what it's doing and where it should be going, it has the ability to unemotionally keep things within that, keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a fun feature request for you, Ben, is like having like a toggle of like how bad of a day is the interviewer having, and then you can play with different versions. And if you want to go like full difficulty, just have like a
Yeah.
total jerk mode, where it gets really
Totally.
difficult.
Yeah. Actually, I like brought up the persona thing because that's actually how I approach how I interact with AI. Like my Claude projects, I set it up as personas. So I like, I don't know if you guys have tried this, but AI is exceptional for therapy.
I
Well,
haven't actually used it for it yet, but I've heard people using it.
you got to do it. And like, I actually tried it out on ChatGPT, and Claude is so much better on it. But I literally have a project that's like Ali, my super therapist and life coach. And I like give it whatever instructions. I tell it like, because I'm the type of person where I'm like, I want to process my emotions. I want to understand what it is I'm feeling, but then I want to very quickly move on to like problem solving, right? Versus some people, I think they like more like validating of their emotions. So I'll put that sort of instruction, like this is my expectation of Ali, and like Ali is a straight talker, and that's kind of how I approach all of like my AI interactions. And I can definitely see AI going more towards that direction, or even like for our courses, right, Ben? If I was able to actually really take our personas, or like the persona of an interviewer that's intimidating.
Yeah, it's funny because that's what Lenny is doing with Lenny Bot, right? Like he created, and now there's a voice interface too, where you could chat with Lenny, and it's trained on all of the content from his newsletter
Yeah.
and his podcast. And I feel like if I could offer my students a Ben Bot, and gosh, I bet this exists already. There's so many new products popping up, it's impossible to keep up with them. And I keep thinking of things. They're like, oh, that already exists, and I'm like, wow. So Irene, does this exist? Can we train something on us right now that would just like internalize some amount of context you want to feed into it and just like emulate you?
The software engineer in me wants to say absolutely. Like, I don't think that AI is there now where you can have like the image aspect of it, but I definitely think in terms of like the context and like the thought and what I would say, and maybe even my personality, I think can come through. I'm gonna get my team on this, Ben. And kind of like figure out what's like the best way to like set that up, because I think that'd be really interesting.
I'm actually really curious about this Ali kind of therapist use cases. I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of craving that. I do some journaling, but sometimes I'm like, I wish I could get some feedback almost of like really almost like direction of be like, hey, there might be something here that we should maybe unpack, or I think this fear is a little bit ridiculous, or I want to learn more while you're feeling that way. So yeah, what is in that project? Like, what is in the context? It sounds like you have a lot of, hey, here's the type of like what I'm expecting from you. Did you also do a full download on who you are and like that context? And then, yeah, the other question I'm curious about is like, how do you like interact with it? Meaning, do you have a day, like scheduled day a week where you go chat with Ali, or is it more of like, as you come, and are you typing? Are you talking to it?
Yeah, so I set up all my projects as like personas with real names. And I think like the two big things about AI, right? Like whether you're just using AI for personal use or if it's like through the company, is like the two things you got to get really good at with AI is giving it context and setting expectations for exactly what it is that you want from them. So, I mean, at least for Ali, I don't actually give upfront the project everything about me. I don't go like all my core memories, all my childhood traumas, things like that. Um, and there's like an actual reason why I do that. But basically I only use it when I have something that comes up. Like I'm
Mm.
facing like a difficult situation where I'm like feeling something, a fear or something. And then I'll just like like for me, I approach it as a discovery. Like I want it to be kind of like a discovery process. And so if the AI knows all my core memories and childhood traumas at the beginning, I feel like it doesn't lend to that, like that discovery. Because then it'll just tell you what it is. And it's like, like I want to like be like, oh my God, I remember now, and like it's because Ali asked me a question that like triggered something in me. So yeah, I'll like every single chat within that project with Ali will be like something different. And I'll always start like sparse about, like I give enough context of this is what I'm feeling, this is what triggered, this is a situation that triggered it, and then be like, why might I be feeling this, can you help me process my emotions? And then it'll kind of like ask me a bunch of questions that I'll like be really thoughtful about, and the sorts of questions it asks is better than any therapist I've ever worked with. Yeah. And
Can you share your project instruction? Is there anything confidential or like sensitive in your project instructions that would prevent us from creating our own alley?
no, it's really, I think it's 5 sentences. I'm like, I don't know if I'm making it out to be like so
I
much
feel like I want your therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a pretty open book, so I'm like happy to share with you some of the stuff that it told me that I was like, wait, what? Like, but also like the best part is I tell Ali specifically, I want you to help me process my emotions, and then I want you to give me coping mechanisms.
Hmm.
And that word coping mechanisms is so important because something Ali will do as a way to help you with a coping mechanism is to give you affirmations, but the affirmations that it gives you is so good, and I wish I could remember some of the affirmations, but so good. The other thing I will say though is I do think it's more effective if someone has been through a personal growth journey, like kind of understands like the fact that so much of our being and the ways that we feel is from childhood experiences and is able to articulate emotions more. Like it makes Ali more effective. um but yeah, it's 10 minutes with Ali is like 20 sessions with a therapist. It's like
Wow,
incredible.
that's an endorsement right there. And one question too: do you, so after you have a conversation, do you save that conversation to the project, or it sounds like you actually don't want any memory at all and you just keep them
No,
separate?
no, I don't want any memory at all. I like, because I don't, I'm not sure if you guys have like therapists before, but I
Yeah.
find that the longer you're with a therapist, the less effective the therapist becomes because they know you so well. And so then they have certain biases about what they think the issue is. So it becomes less of a blank slate.
That resonates for me because I remember some of my most effective therapy sessions I've had were almost like the initial discovery sessions. And then
Yeah.
you settle into some kind of like ongoing conversation mode, or it's like season 2 or whatever comes around. And it's like, all right,
Yeah,
no new characters being introduced here anymore.
I agree with the feeling. I disagree with the reason. Like, I actually think the reason why you like, same with coaches, right? I think like most coaches have an expiration date. I think most therapists have an expiration date. It's less about, I actually think that having the context is really helpful because sometimes they'll make a lot of assumptions about who you are. But I think the problem is that you probably they've already shown you all their tools to the point that like once they've given you like their capabilities or what they're good at or their method, like you've already kind of like absorbed everything that you could get through that method. Um, and I think my suspicion why people go to therapy is because like they need like a dedicated space to process emotions that otherwise they wouldn't. But I feel like the true breakout, like if you're on true breakthrough, that's when you're doing like that difficult work that maybe it's a little bit more active. So I don't know. I think that's like my take there.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way before, but yeah, I think that definitely kind of like sparks something in me and my own experience. But yeah, that's why I try to keep it as a blank slate. For me, it's like I want to discover new things about myself, and I want it to be a discovery process and less of someone telling me something because they already know so much about me, and so they're coming with these assumptions.
So an example of how you could use Ally might be something like, let's say I get a ping. I'm just trying to tie this back to the work life, for example, but like someone who I work with pings me something that just annoys me or upsets me, and I can take a screenshot of that and drop it into Ally and be like, could you help me understand why this is bothering me? Something like that. Is that like an example of like a way to use it?
I've never used a screenshot, but yeah, you could totally use a screenshot. I guess
It's actually really good at parsing like text out of
like
screenshots from what I've
text,
seen.
yeah, which I think
Yeah.
is like mind blowing. Yeah, I'm trying to think like how do I typically approach it? I'm very sparse with my initial message, and I'm because the whole point of it is I want it to be a discovery. I want it to be a journey for me. I want it to have moments of, and so I like start very sparse. I'm like, this was a trigger. This is how I feel. Can you
Mm.
help me understand why I feel this way and like a different way of thinking about it?
Mm.
And then like, Ali will then like keep, like say whatever. And then the questions, and they always ask questions at the end, right? They'll always be like, okay, so these are the two different ways that we can like which one would you like to explore more? And then I just follow that. But like sometimes with AI is like you still have to give it direction. So if it keeps going down a certain rabbit hole and then you're like, wait, we got to go back to the original thing. Like sometimes I'll like guide Ali back. Is like, Ali, great. I'll talk to it like a person. I'll be like, that's a great question. I actually want to go back to what we were talking about before. Yeah, I just follow that trail, and like very often I find that it'll ask me a question that is so outside of my realm of typical thinking that it just feels like a journey for me. And it's
Yeah.
like pretty cool.
If there's any Anthropic PMs listening, I really hope you're launching tasks soon, because I'm just thinking about like how cool would it be if like then it gives you some homework and then it like shoots like those tasks for the next day. Like I've been playing around with the tasks feature for ChatGPT and it's
Mhm.
actually pretty cool. But I really hope they come up with that, because I think that would be such a cool use case pairing of like that project would then be like, hey, it sounds like maybe you should, I don't know, do those affirmations, or maybe you need more time to unwind, and like a
Yeah.
reminder, 8 a.m., go for a walk or something like that. Like I think that would be so cool.
Yeah, I even had Ali at one point. I was like, I don't remember what it was, but Ali was like, I wonder what your mom would say about this, because my mom has a very abundant mindset. My dad's like a very scarcity mindset. So Ali's like, I wonder what your mom would say, and I didn't think about it. I was like, oh, I gotta call my mom and ask her. So like that being a task would be like pretty cool to like call my
Yeah,
mom and ask her about this specific scenario.
cool. Hopefully they're listening and it's coming soon. But anyways, I feel like I could be talking for a couple more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time, Irene. So maybe two final questions for you. One
Yeah.
is, where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm most active on LinkedIn, and I love hearing from people. Like sometimes product managers will send me like a DM and just talk about what they're struggling with. I'm going to be setting up more like live events to help product managers, like give them a safe space where they can ask me like the sorts of questions that they feel like they're not able to ask anyone at work. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. Send me a connect request, just add a little notes to it so that I know that you heard about me through Supra. You can go onto my website if you ever have this moment of imposter syndrome, or like, I don't know what an API is, I can't communicate with engineers. Go to skiplevel.co. I have a lot of free resources on there, but if you're interested, sign up for the course. There's a community attached that you can ask any questions, and I actually answer them. I have a newsletter that right now is once a month. I'm looking into if I can do it more often than once a month. But yeah, you can find me through LinkedIn and skiplevel.co.
I mean, and in addition to checking all those things out, which we'll add to the show notes, anything else that our audience can do to be helpful to you?
Yeah, just like sharing your experience, like that vulnerability of telling me like what you're really struggling with, helps me a lot to understand how I can create more value for the product management community, especially in the space that I'm so passionate about, helping cross-functional teams, especially with engineers, just have a better relationship, and helping product managers not have that intense feeling of being an imposter. And yeah, just bringing more clarity and happiness and success to everyone.
Amazing. The master plan will be, one, get everyone into their own alley,
Get
AI
everyone's their
therapist.
own
Then
ally.
people will
Yep.
get more vulnerable, and then people will have the courage to reach out to Irene with some
Yes.
help.
Yeah.
Love it.
Love it.
Amazing. This has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, have a great day, both of you.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much, Mark. It was really fun.
For sure. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who you think would benefit from it as well. We really appreciate it. We'd also love a follow or a rating on Substack, Spotify, or YouTube. That's going to let other people find us. And if you have any topic recommendations for a future episode, please send myself or Mark a DM on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.